My name is Daniel Dolinsky, and I'm the product manager for the 4D system from CA Experts. And today I want to show you how you can visualize Oracle Primavera P6 progress in UniversalPlantViewer. So the agenda for today is that I try to answer the following questions. What is 4D system and who is using it? How does it fit in your infrastructure? What are typical use cases for 4D system? How can you link UPV objects to P6 activities? And how does it look like? So I will do a live demo at the end of these PowerPoint slides here. So let's start with the question, what is 4D system and who is using it? The 4D system is a tool that allows you to connect P6 activities to UPV items. And it allows also to visualize progress data from P6 in UniversalPlantViewer. So this demo is getting a little bit technical. So I assume we have a lot of UniversalPlantViewer users in here and also some users of P6. So to understand this fully, I recommend that you talk to your colleagues. So the P6 people should talk to the UPV people and the other way around to get the full picture of this tool. Who is typically using it? Owner-operators and EPCs regarding the companies that are using it. And they usually have existing installations of P6 and UniversalPlantViewer. And there are two types of people using this. So we have the typical P6 users handling the activity planning and now generating these progress data for UPV, including the coloring and all this stuff. And the typical users of UPV on the other side, like engineers, workers, managers, that want to work with the visualization and that are not really interested in the internal details of P6 or perhaps don't have a P6 connection at all. So let's have a look at the infrastructure. So we assume that you have already an Oracle Primavera P6 server up and running and also the P6 integration API. And a useful tool, of course, would be to have a P6 client to work with the information on the server. And on the CA Expert side of things, we expect that you are using UniversalPlantViewer and you have the UPV API module. So our tool fits in the middle and it's talking to the integration API to access the data from Primavera P6 and to access the information from UniversalPlantViewer and also to write in both directions. So the so-called 4D system consists of two components. One is a web service. This is typically installed next, for example, to the P6 client. And this is talking to the integration API and a graphical user interface that is running an embedded CA Experts UniversalPlantViewer. So that's the combination you would use as a P6 user to set up the links between the UPV and the P6 items. But you can also create, using the graphical user interface, some animation files for UniversalPlantViewer 6.1. And any user of UPV can run these animation files on, for example, mobile devices. So if you have an installation of this version of UPV, you can open up these animation files, jump to a certain date, and then you will see what needs to be done in your plant. So we can do colorization based on timestamps there. So that's useful, for example, if you have electricians on site without internet connection, just give them the animation files and then they can select the current date and they will know what to do just by the color codes that show up on the objects in UPV. What are the typical use cases? We have three use cases here, A, B, and C. So use case A is that you have a 3D model already, but no P6 activities. So in this case, you can use the 4D system to create activities from the 3D model data. So you create the activities in P6 just by assigning rules to your project, and the rules will then filter the items in the 3D model and create the activities in P6. Then use case B is that you have P6 activities but no 3D model yet. So for example, you are an EPC, you know how to build a plant, but the 3D model for the plant isn't there yet. So you already have your plan in P6. So you can use 4D System to add rules to the activities in P6, and then you can run an update. So as soon as you add some objects to the 3D model, they will be automatically attached to the activities in P6. And the third typical use case is that you have already P6 activities and 3D model items. Perhaps you are an owner operator, so you have an as-built model of your plant, and you already have some P6 activities, for example, on how to replace a certain tank or rebuild a certain area. And in this case, you can just use 4D System to link the existing activities and the existing 3D model items. How can you link the UPV objects to the P6 activities? We have three methods. One is quite new. So the first method is that you select the items in UPV and you select the activities in Primavera, P6, and then you click on Assign individually. Well, of course, if you have 100,000 items to match there, that's a very painful process. So it's not recommended, but if it's just about removing a tank and the pipeline, it might be okay. A second, and it's the kind of standard process, is that you place a JSON file with predefined rules, which are basically filter conditions to group objects in the project folder of UniversalPlantViewer. And then you select a rule from a drop-down box in the graphical user interface of our 4D system. Select roughly a whole area or unit in UPV. So for example, the rule is about piping and you just select a whole unit with steel, piping and equipment. Then it would just ignore the selected equipment because it's not in the filter for the piping elements. And then you click Assign by Rule and it's going through all the items that are selected, and if they fit the rule, it will attach these items to the objects in Primavera P6. And then finally, we've got a new method here. The customer has asked us to do this, and I think it's a brilliant idea. With a current version, you can now load links from Excel. So it's basically an Excel file containing filter conditions, activity names, and so on. And then you can just load the Excel file, and it would link the activities to the items in UniversalPlantViewer and even create activities if necessary. So now let's have a look onto these real objects. Let's go to the live demo, and let's start with the rules files. So that's the JSON file that you can use to link objects. As I said, it's getting a little bit technical here, so the UPV users might already know how we can filter things in UPV. So here we would create a condition that looks for items in UPV with the key pipe run, and we would just group them. So basically that would give us the pipelines from the objects that were selected. And the second one here is a condition combined out of name is something, and we group it. So basically the same that we have up here. And we also filter for the key task that should be equipment. So that would give us a single activity per equipment item in Primavera. So what about the prefabrication here? So that's the first rule set, and it gives us the pipelines that have to be added to the activities for prefabrication. And here you can see we have basically the same condition for erection. So let's assume, for example, you have a certain valve and that needs to be removed from the pipeline, cleaned, and put back into place on the pipeline. Then you would have three different activities in here. And that's what these items do. So you would always want to have the same item to be handled by a certain activity. And here you want to create 3 activities, one to remove the item from the pipeline, one to clean it, and one to put it back in place. And so it's created using these rules files. So you filter for the items and you define a name here for the activity. So that's the rules files. Second method is to use the Excel table. So that's what we have now, and I think it's really useful. In a couple of seconds, we will see an architectural model in the 4D system, and there are some lampposts, and we can group them. So here a lamppost consists out of 3 different items, and we just filter for the UID, the unique identifier. So we can also use for these filters things like name is something, or name starts with pipe, for example. So that are just the filters here that grab certain items in UniversalPlantViewer and give them this name, like lamp blend 0, lamp 0, and so on. On this tab, we can group these names. So again, we have these 3 names, and they are now grouped to an object lamp 0. And here on this tab, we can use these rows to add a lamp 0 activity ID to our Primavera project. That's basically installing the lamp. So that's the third method of getting objects into the system. So how does it look like? And how does it store the information in P6? First, let's have a look on the P6 system. Here we've got this architectural model, and as you can see, again, we have our lamp 0 in here that was created from this file. And the way we store data is we add these notebook items called UniversalPlantViewer to the P6 activities. So each activity has its own notebook item, and we can store about 2 GB of data in here. So usually, of course, it's not needed. As you can see, it's a lot of data in here, but that's not 2 GB. So what we store are the results of the query. So basically, that are the items that were connected to this activity the last time we run we run the query. And in here we would have the conditions. So as you can see here, it's empty. So in here we would have the conditions that created these objects. They came out of the Excel files, so we don't have real singular conditions in here. So it's just loading these items to the activity. And that were the items that were selected when we connected this. So here again, it's empty. But we have the full information in here to recreate this list of items. So we could just update this, and it would add additional objects, or it would remove objects that were deleted over there in UPV. So that's P6 standard client. And now let's have a look onto our tool. So I just run the 4D system. And that will start up and also start a UniversalPlantViewer. So it's just running the exe file that it finds in the same folder. So this means if you get a new version of UPV, you can just place this into the same folder over here. And basically that's it. So it's then up and running. So we'll just make this a little bit bigger. So you can see we have the structure down here. And you see we have a cleanup X over there in the Gantt chart and a cleanup X here. And I can just rename this. So now it already got renamed in the Primavera database. And when I go to the viewer over here, I have to press F5. So it pulls the data. And as you can see, it removed the X here on the name. So we have a live connection from our 4D system to the Primavera database. Let's have a look at the items in here. So I can, for example, select all the activities down here on the Gantt chart. and jump to the first date. And as you can see, the UPV reacts immediately. So it put all the items onto this transparent color. And then I can press the play button. And now it's jumping down here from timestamp to timestamp. So as you can see, it jumped from the 4th to the 7th because there were no changes on the weekend. So it's really jumping from a change in the state of the data to the next one. So if there is nothing done on the site for, let's say, 1 month, it would just skip 1 month and jump to this modification date. And as you can see here, if I zoom in a little bit, you get a live animation of the items that need to be worked on. Of course, you can stop the animation and restart this, jump to a certain date, and so on. So it's really highlighting what needs to be done. And we can basically read in the start and the finish date and the progress of these items. And then we decide what color to use to do this animation. So basically that's the output in here. But to have it here, of course, you have to have the active connection to Primavera in P6 in the background, our web service running there, and also the UPV embedded. So it's basically just on a Windows system and all the APIs up and running. But what we have is this Save Animation button, and when you press this, it creates a UPVF file containing the animation, and you can just run this animation you've seen here in the viewer. So you can send a colleague this UPVF file, and the colleague can run this UPVF animation on a mobile device. So it's no need then to have on the mobile device a connection to Primavera, knowledge about Gantt charts and so on. So it's just the animation file, and you can select a certain date and time, and then it will highlight, for example, the wall outlets an electrician has to work with at a certain date. So that's the animation, basically the output of this tool. Then let's go back to the assignments. Just to see where the buttons are located I was talking about a couple of minutes ago. So with assign individually, you just select items over here in UPV, you select an activity down here, and then you press assign individually and you get the connection. So that's of course a really difficult task for hundreds of thousands of objects, but let's say it's just the photovoltaics here on top of the roof. It can easily be done, just let's say 50 items or so. Then the basic method is to use the assign by rule button. So in this case, you select a certain area over here of items. So for example, you click here and select everything. You select from the drop-down box one of these rule names from the JSON file, and you press assign by rule. And then it reads in all these items over there, checks against the rule, and creates or modifies the activities down here. Then, of course, you can remove assignments using this button, and you can use the import assignments button to load these assignments from the Excel file I've just shown you. So basically, that's the workflow regarding these objects. Then we have some little helpers in here, so that allows you to select tasks or activities down here that are already assigned, or activities that are not assigned yet. So you basically can find empty Primavera P6 activities using this button. And on this UniversalPlantViewer tab, you can select and highlight assigned objects directly in UPV. And using this button, you can clear the highlight on the objects. So basically, that's the functionality of the tool. Regarding the setup, so that's quite easy, but again, probably the P6 people would need to talk to the UPV people. On the Primavera side of things, you install, so on my system, it's here in this virtual machine where I have also my client. You install a little web service, that comes with our setup package, and the web service is talking to the P6 API. So it's reading and writing data from and to Primavera via the API. And then you set up here on this Primavera tab just the remote address of this web service, the username and the password. So that's everything you need to get this set up on the Primavera side of things. And for UniversalPlantViewer, you need to install the UPV API, because that's the way we talk to the viewer in here. And of course, you need to have the viewer. So basically place the exe next to 4D system or 4D system next to the exe file, and then it will find this viewer automatically and connect to it via the API, as far as the license key for the API is available.